Millionaire's triplets grew up believing they would never see the world, living trapped in a blindness everyone considered permanent. But everything changes when, in the middle of a crowded park, they run alone to a homeless stranger and begin to describe colors and shapes for the first time. This unlikely encounter reveals family secrets and triggers a turn of events that exposes old traumas, mistaken diagnoses, and truths no one dared to face. And it is beside this mysterious woman from the streets that everyone discovers that the true blindness was never in the eyes, but in the pains. No one had the courage to see. Robert Ashford woke before the alarm went off, as he did every morning since Eleanor had left. The silence of the large house on the Upper East Side seemed heavier in the early hours of the day, when there were no children's voices or hurried footsteps along the marble corridors. He rose from the king-size bed he had occupied alone for 3 years and walked to the window, watching New York City awaken under the morning haze. Down below, the city buzzed with its millions of inhabitants, each carrying their own stories, their own pains. At 42, Robert had built an empire in the real estate sector. Ashford Developments was synonymous with luxury and exclusivity, with properties scattered throughout the city. But none of the awards that decorated his office or the impressive numbers in his bank accounts could fill the void Eleanor had left. He quickly dressed in a navy blue suit, adjusted his tie in front of the mirror, and went down for breakfast. In the kitchen, Clara was already preparing everything with the efficiency of someone who had known the routine for years. The nanny, in her early 50s, had a maternal way that brought some comfort to this house marked by absence. She smiled when she saw Robert enter. "Good morning, Mr. Ashford. The coffee is fresh. The girls are still sleeping, but they should be up any moment." Robert nodded and poured himself a black coffee, strong enough to face another day of endless meetings and million-dollar decisions. He glanced at the clock. 6:30 in the morning. He needed to be at the office by 8 for a video conference with Japanese investors. That's when he heard it. First a soft sound, then clearer. Small, hesitant footsteps upstairs followed by the unmistakable shuffle of canes on the hardwood floor. His heart tightened, as it always did when he heard that sound. Julia, Sophia, and Helen were waking up. "I'll go up to help them," Clara said, putting down her cup. "No, I'll go," Robert replied, surprising himself. Lately, he barely saw his daughters awake. He left before they got up and returned when they were already asleep. Beatrice, his sister-in-law, took care of almost everything related to the girls. He went up the stairs with long strides but slowed his pace as he approached the triplets' room. The door was ajar. He pushed it open slowly and saw the scene that repeated every morning. 3 identical girls, their curly brown hair loose on their shoulders, sitting on the edge of their beds, each holding her white cane with tiny hands. "Daddy?" asked Julia, turning her face toward the door. She was always the first to speak. "Is that you?" "It's me, my flower." "Good morning, my princesses." "Good morning, Daddy," Sophia and Helen answered in unison, the way only twins could. Robert approached and knelt before them. Julia reached out her hands until she touched her father's face, as she always did. Her little fingers traced his features with a familiarity that made Robert's heart break and rebuild itself at the same time. "You're wearing a different cologne," Sophia observed, sniffing the air. "Is it new?" "It is. Do you like it?" "I like the other one better." "This one is too strong," she replied, with the brutal honesty of children. Helen said nothing, just smiled in the general direction where she knew her father was. She was the quietest of the 3, the one who most resembled Eleanor in her reserved manner. Robert helped each of them get dressed, something Clara or Beatrice usually did. He picked up the little dresses that were already laid out, blue for Julia, pink for Sophia, and yellow for Helen. It was the only way to tell them apart quickly, though those who knew them well could perceive small differences in the way each one moved, spoke, and existed in the world. "Is Auntie B coming today?" Helen asked as Robert buttoned her dress. "Yes, she is. She's taking you to the doctor." "Again?" Julia complained. "We always go to the doctor. I don't like the smell there." "It's important, my flower. Dr. Harrison needs to check on you." "But he never does anything," Sophia insisted. "He just looks into our eyes with that little light, and says everything is the same. Robert didn't know what to say. She was right. Every appointment for the last 4 years had yielded the same diagnosis: irreversible congenital blindness. The girls were born this way, Dr. Harrison, a renowned ophthalmologist who had followed the case since their birth, would explain. There was no surgery, no cure. It was a condition they would have to learn to live with. "But you're developing so well," Robert said, stroking Julia's hair. "Getting smarter every day." "Daddy, can I ask you a question?" Helen said suddenly. "Of course, my love." "Why do you never talk about Mommy?" The silence that followed was so thick it seemed to have weight. Robert felt his throat close up. The girls were only a year old when Eleanor was gone. They had no conscious memories of her, only the stories others told. And he, Robert realized with a pang of guilt, didn't tell stories. He simply didn't talk about Eleanor. It was too painful. "I do talk about her," he lied, his voice coming out hoarse. "No, you don't," Julia corrected with her usual frankness. "Auntie B does, Clara does, but you don't." "Your mother was a very special person," Robert began, fighting the lump in his throat. She loved you more than anything in the world. Auntie B said Mommy had hair just like ours," Sophia said, "and that she sang really well." "She did," Robert confirmed, allowing himself to remember. "Eleanor had a sweet voice that used to fill that house with melodies. She loved to sing while cooking, while arranging flowers, while simply existing." The house fell silent after she left. "Are you going to work all day again?" Helen asked. It was more of a statement than a question. "I have to, my daughter, but I promise I'll be back earlier today." "You always promise that," Julia muttered, and Robert pretended not to hear. They went down to breakfast hand in hand, the girls holding their canes with their other hand, counting the steps in a low voice as Beatrice had taught them. 15 steps on the main staircase. They knew every corner of that house, every piece of furniture, every obstacle. Even so, they moved with a caution that broke Robert's heart. At the table, Clara had already prepared their breakfast: toast with butter, fresh orange juice, and chopped fruit. She always placed everything in the same positions on the plate, so the girls would know where to find each food item. Robert watched them eat with that intense concentration, using their forks carefully, guiding themselves by touch. They were so small and already had to be so strong. He felt that familiar mix of pride and pain that always accompanied him when he looked at his daughters. His cell phone vibrated. Work messages were starting to arrive. Charts, reports, problems that needed immediate solutions. Robert typed quick replies, his mind already at the office. "Daddy's on his phone again," Sophia said to her sisters. "Yes, he is," Julia agreed. "He always is." Robert put the phone away, feeling reprimanded. 4-year-old children shouldn't be so aware of their parents' absences, he thought. But these 3 were. They were different. They had to be. "I have to go, girls," he announced, standing up. "Beatrice will be here soon to take you to the doctor." "Bye, Daddy," the 3 said without much emotion. They were used to these quick goodbyes. Robert kissed each of their foreheads, smelling the baby soap they used. He picked up his briefcase and headed for the garage. His black, gleaming Mercedes was waiting. He got in and started the engine, but he sat there for a moment, looking at the house in the rearview mirror. He remembered when he had bought this mansion. Eleanor was 6 months pregnant with the triplets. She had loved the house, especially the huge garden in the back, with the century-old cherry tree. She said the girls would play there, that there would be birthday parties on that lawn, that they would fill every room with laughter and life. But none of that had happened. The girls barely left the house. Beatrice was afraid they would get hurt, that the world outside was too dangerous for 3 blind children. And Robert, immersed in work, never questioned it. It was easier that way, less painful. He pulled out of the garage and into the chaotic New York City traffic. The streets were already congested even at that hour. Robert turned on the radio, but quickly turned it off. News about the economy, politics, urban violence, none of it really mattered. At a stoplight, he pulled up next to a family in a modest car. A girl about his daughter's age was looking out the window, her eyes wide as she observed the world. She waved at Robert, an innocent and cheerful gesture. He waved back, feeling a pang in his chest. His daughters would never look at the world that way. They would never see the colors of the sky, the shapes of the clouds, their own father's face. The traffic moved, and Robert continued to the office, to another day of meetings and decisions, to another day of escape, because that's what he was doing, he realized now. Escaping. Escaping the house Eleanor had filled with dreams, escaping the daughters who looked so much like Eleanor, escaping the pain he had never truly processed. In the rearview mirror, he saw his own reflection. A successful man in an impeccable suit driving a luxury car. But inside, Robert knew, he was as lost as 3 4-year-old girls fumbling in the dark. The difference was that he had chosen his own blindness, and he didn't even realize it was possible to see again. The day had barely begun, and Robert Ashford already longed for its end, as he did every day since he learned it was possible to live without truly being alive. He accelerated toward the office, leaving behind the house, his daughters, and another opportunity to be present instead of just existing. Beatrice Carter arrived at Robert's house at 9 in the morning sharp, as she did 3 times a week. She was 38, 4 years younger than Eleanor would have been if she were still here, and she carried on her shoulders the weight of caring for her nieces, as if they were her own daughters. In fact, she thought as she parked her silver Civic in the garage, they were all she had left of Eleanor. The two had grown up together in the same orphanage in the Bronx. They weren't sisters by blood, but the bond they shared was stronger than many biological ties. Eleanor had been adopted at 10 by a middle-class family, and Beatrice had been left behind, leaving the institution only at 18, when the law required it. Even when separated, they kept in touch. Eleanor never forgot her, never abandoned her. When she married Robert, she made sure Beatrice was present at every important moment. Beatrice rang the doorbell, and Clara opened the door with a welcoming smile. The two greeted each other, and Beatrice entered, feeling that familiar tightness in her chest that always accompanied her in that house. Everything there reminded her of Eleanor, the curtains she had chosen, the paintings that decorated the walls, the crystal vase she had received as a wedding gift. "Auntie B!" Julia shouted from upstairs. It was incredible how the girls recognized footsteps. Each person had a different sound when they walked, and the triplets had learned to identify everyone who frequented the house. "I'm here, my sweet," Beatrice answered, climbing the stairs. She found the 3 girls playing in their room with textured building blocks, each piece with a different surface, so they could distinguish them by touch. Beatrice watched them for a moment before fully announcing her presence. Julia was the most talkative, always asking questions and making comments. Sophia had a peculiar sense of humor, making jokes that were surprising for such a young child. Helen was the contemplative one, the one who preferred to listen and absorb before speaking. They were so different from each other, yet united by that invisible thread that only twins shared. "Let's get ready for the doctor," Beatrice announced in the gentle voice she always used with the girls. "Did you have breakfast?" "We did," Sophia replied. "Daddy was here this morning. It was weird." "Weird how?" Beatrice asked, helping Helen put the blocks away. "He stayed. He didn't rush out right after waking up. He even helped us get dressed." Beatrice felt a pang of something she couldn't name. Jealousy? No, that wasn't it. It was more like a concern. Robert had been so distant for so long that any change in his pattern seemed suspicious. Was this sudden closeness healthy, or just another way for him to poorly handle the guilt he surely felt? "He asked about Mommy," Helen added quietly. "Or rather, we asked, and he answered." Beatrice stopped what she was doing. Eleanor was a sensitive topic. Robert didn't talk about her. The girls knew very little. It had been Beatrice who had taken on the responsibility of keeping her sister's memory alive, telling stories, showing photos that the girls couldn't see but could touch. "And what did he say?" Beatrice asked, trying to sound casual. "That she sang well," Julia replied. "But we already knew that. You tell us that all the time." Beatrice smiled sadly. It was true. She told the same stories over and over, as if by doing so she could keep Eleanor present somehow. But there was so much the girls didn't know, so much they might never know. She helped each of them put on the orthopedic shoes the doctor had recommended for better stability. She checked that their canes were in order, that their little backpacks with water and snacks were ready. Beatrice was meticulous in her preparation. There could be no unexpected events. The world outside was too dangerous for 3 blind children, and she needed to control every possible variable. "Clara, we're leaving," Beatrice announced. "We should be back around noon." "All right," the nanny replied. "I'll get the girls' lunch ready. Stroganoff, their favorite." In the car, Beatrice settled the 3 in the back seat, each in her special car seat with a 5-point harness. She drove slowly, with excessive care, stopping completely at every speed bump, braking gently at every traffic light. The girls were used to this cautious pace. "Auntie B, why do we have to go to Dr. Harrison's?" "Again?" Sophia asked. "He never does anything different." "It's important to have checkups," Beatrice answered automatically. "The doctor needs to make sure you're doing okay." "But we're always okay," Julia insisted. "Or always the same, which is the same thing." Beatrice had no answer for that. The truth was, she herself sometimes questioned the usefulness of these constant appointments, but she was afraid to stop, afraid that if there wasn't constant vigilance, something worse might happen. She had learned in the orphanage that carelessness led to terrible consequences. Children who weren't watched got hurt, disappeared, suffered. She would not let. That happened to Eleanor's daughters. Dr. Harrison's office was in a medical building in Midtown Manhattan. Beatrice parked in the underground garage and helped the girls out of the car, each holding her hand or a sister's hand. They formed a human chain, connected and dependent on one another. In the elevator, an elderly couple got in with them. The woman looked at the girls with an expression Beatrice knew well, pity mixed with discomfort. People never knew how to act around children with disabilities. Some were overly friendly, others avoided making eye contact. "Are they triplets?" the lady asked, trying to be kind. "Yes, they are," Beatrice replied, squeezing Julia's hand tighter. "How lovely. How old are they?" 4. The woman looked at the canes, at the girl's eyes that didn't focus on anything specific, and her expression changed to something darker. "Poor little things," she murmured, low enough to think Beatrice wouldn't hear, but loud enough that she did. Beatrice felt anger boil inside her. They were not poor little things. They were intelligent, strong, capable children. The fact that they couldn't see didn't make them objects of pity, but she swallowed her words, as she always did. There was no point in educating every ignorant person who crossed her path. The elevator stopped on the 12th floor, and they got out. The office was familiar. The girls knew the way from the reception to the exam room. They counted the steps, recognized the antiseptic smell that permeated the air. "Good morning, Ms. Carter," greeted the receptionist, Marcia, who knew them well. "The girls can go right in. The doctor is waiting." Dr. Harrison was a man in his 60s, with grey hair and thick-rimmed glasses. He had been treating the family since the triplets' birth. It was he who had given the initial diagnosis, right after the complicated delivery that had taken Eleanor. Beatrice remembered that day as if it were yesterday. The chaos of the ICU, Eleanor fighting for her life, the newborn babies in the incubator. Robert was in shock, unable to make any decisions. It fell to Beatrice to deal with the doctors, sign papers, make choices. And when Dr. Harrison appeared with that serious look and said the girls showed signs of congenital blindness, Beatrice simply accepted it. It was one more tragedy in a pile of tragedies. She didn't question it. She didn't ask for a second opinion. She just noted the recommendations and began to build the girls' lives around that truth. "Hello, my little ones," the doctor greeted in a soft voice. "How are you today?" "Fine," the 3 replied in chorus. "Excellent. Let's do the routine exam, shall we? It won't hurt a bit." The exam was always the same. Lights directed at their eyes, instruments that checked the ocular structure, pupillary reflex tests. The girls behaved well, accustomed to this quarterly routine. Beatrice watched everything attentively, as if she could find a different answer in the doctor's expressions. But it was always the same. Dr. Harrison made notes, muttered technical words to himself, and then turned to Beatrice with that look she knew by heart. "The condition remains stable," he announced, putting away his instruments. "There's no worsening, which is good, but there's also no improvement, which was expected. Congenital blindness is a permanent condition." "And is there really nothing we can do?" Beatrice asked for the 1,000th time, knowing what the answer would be. Unfortunately, no, but the girls are developing wonderfully in all other aspects. Continue with the occupational therapy, the Braille lessons. With all the support you already provide, you're doing an excellent job. Beatrice nodded, feeling that familiar weight in her chest. Excellent. Everyone always said she was doing an excellent job. But why then did she feel like she was failing? Why did she wake up in the middle of the night with the feeling that something was wrong, something she wasn't seeing? "You can schedule the follow-up for 3 months from now," the doctor said, handing her the request form. "And any changes, anything out of the ordinary, call me immediately." Change, Beatrice thought as she guided the girls back to the elevator. What change could there be? Everything was always the same, predictable, controlled. That's how it had to be. That's how she kept them safe. On the way back home, they stopped at a cafe for a quick snack. Beatrice always chose the same place, a well-known chain where the staff was already used to the girls. She always ordered the same thing, apple juice and cheese danishes, nothing that could cause allergies or stomach upset. "Auntie B, can we go to the park?" Helen asked suddenly. "The park? What park, my sweet?" "The park that's nearby. You can smell the trees from the car window." Beatrice hesitated. Parks were unpredictable. There were children running, bicycles, dogs off-leash, many things that could go wrong. "Not today, dear. It's too hot outside. Let's go home, where you can play in the garden." "But we never go in the garden," Sophia protested. "You always think it's too hot or too cold, or that it's going to rain." Beatrice felt a pang of guilt. It was true. The huge garden, which Eleanor had adored, was practically unused. She was afraid to let the girls play there. What if they tripped on these roots of the cherry tree? What if they got lost among the plants? It was safer inside the house where everything was known and controlled. "We're going home," Beatrice repeated, using a tone that brooked no argument. "Clara made stroganoff for you." The girls were quiet for the rest of the ride. Beatrice watched them in the rearview mirror, their identical little faces turned toward the windows, as if they could see the city passing by outside. Sometimes she wondered what went on in their minds. Did they imagine what the world they couldn't see was like? Did they dream, in colors they had never known? When they got home, Beatrice helped each one take off her shoes and put her cane in its proper place. Everything had its place, its order. That's how it worked. That's how it had to be. Eleanor had entrusted her daughters to her. And Beatrice would not fail. No matter what it cost, no matter how much she had to control and protect, she would keep those girls safe. Always. Even if it meant keeping them trapped in a protective bubble so strong that it sometimes seemed to suffocate not only the children, but Beatrice herself. But she didn't know how to live any other way. The orphanage had taught her that the world was cruel, that only the vigilant survived, that love meant absolute protection. And Beatrice loved those girls more than she had ever loved anyone, except Eleanor. So she would protect. Always. No matter the price. The following days passed in the same old routine. Robert left early and came home late. Beatrice visited the girls regularly. Clara managed the house with her quiet efficiency. Everything was predictable, orderly, safe. But there was something different in the air, a restlessness that none of the adults could quite name. Robert was noticing more. After that morning when he helped his daughters get dressed, something had shifted in him. Small things started to bother him. The excessive silence of the house, the way the girls always moved with the same caution, as if the floor might open up at any moment, the way Beatrice controlled every aspect of their lives with a rigidity that bordered on obsession. On a Thursday evening, he came home earlier than usual. It was 7 o'clock, a time when the girls were still awake. He found Beatrice in the living room reading a Braille book aloud to the triplets. "Robert, you're home," she said, surprised. "Did something happen?" "Can't I come home early to my own house?" he replied, sharper than he intended. The girls recognized their father's voice, and their little faces lit up. "Daddy," Julia called, stretching her arms toward the voice. Robert approached and sat on the floor with them, something he hadn't done in how long? Months. Years. The girls immediately snuggled up to him, touching his face, his hair, recognizing him by touch. "You're really here," Sophia said, as if needing confirmation. "Not just to say goodbye?" "I'm really here," Robert confirmed, his heart aching. "What story is Auntie B telling?" "The story of the princess who lost her kingdom," Helen answered. "But she's going to find it again in the end." Beatrice watched the scene with an expression Robert couldn't decipher. There was something there, a tension he had never noticed before. Or maybe it had always been there, and he just hadn't wanted to see it. "B, can we talk?" Robert asked after the girls had been put to bed by Clara. Beatrice followed him to the study, a room Robert rarely used at home. He preferred to work at his corporate office, far from the memories that every corner of this house evoked. "What is it?" Beatrice asked, sitting in one of the leather armchairs. Robert didn't quite know how to begin, how to express the growing restlessness inside him, how to question the only person who had truly dedicated herself to the girls for the past 3 years. "Don't you think the girls are too isolated?" he began, choosing his words carefully. "Isolated? They have occupational therapy twice a week, braille lessons, regular medical checkups. They're not isolated. But they don't have friends, they don't go to parks, they don't interact with other children." Beatrice visibly tensed. "Robert, they're blind. It's not like they can just run around playing like normal children." "Normal," Robert repeated, feeling anger begin to simmer. "They are normal, B, they just can't see. You know what I mean. The world out there is dangerous. They could get hurt, they could get lost. Someone could take advantage of them." "Or they could live," Robert shot back. "They could feel the sun on their faces, hear real birds instead of recordings, touch grass with their bare feet." "And you want this now?" Beatrice asked, rising from the armchair. "After 3 years of being a shadow in their lives, now you want to be a father. Where were you when they learned to walk, when they said their first word, when they cried for the mother they never knew?" The silence that followed was cutting. Robert knew she was right. He had been absent, neglectful, cowardly. He had taken refuge in his work because it was easier than facing 3 little girls who were perfect copies of the woman he had lost. "I know I failed," Robert admitted, his voice low. "But I want to change that. I want to be present. And I think you need to loosen up a bit too. Let them breathe." "I take care of them the way I know how," Beatrice replied, and Robert noticed there were tears in her eyes. "The way I learned. If that's not good enough for you, then maybe you should have been more present from the beginning." She left the study, leaving Robert alone with his thoughts. He knew the conversation had not gone well, but he also knew that something had to change. The girls were growing up in a bubble, protected from everything, including life itself. The following Saturday, Robert made a decision. He would take his daughters for a walk, alone, without Beatrice, without Clara, just him and the 3 girls. The idea terrified him, but it also excited him. When was the last time he had felt excited about something that didn't involve closing a deal? "Girls," he announced at breakfast, "today we're going out. Just you and me." "Out where?" Julia asked, curious. "It's a surprise." Beatrice was in the kitchen helping Clara. He could feel her disapproving gaze, but she said nothing. The conversation from Thursday still hung between them, unresolved but also not ignored. Robert dressed the girls in comfortable clothes, got their canes, and packed water and snacks in a backpack. He felt unprepared, as if he were about to climb a mountain without the proper gear, but he was determined. In the car, as he drove toward downtown, the girls asked non-stop questions. Where were they going? How long would it take? Could they have ice cream? Robert answered patiently, discovering that he enjoyed the childish chatter he usually avoided. He parked near Washington Square Park, one of the busiest spots in New York City. It was Saturday morning, and the park was full of families, street vendors, and performers. Robert helped each girl out of the car, feeling them tense up at the unfamiliar sounds surrounding them. "Where are we?" Sophia asked, gripping her father's hand tightly. "In a big park right in the middle of the city. There are lots of people, lots of sounds. But I'm holding on to you. You won't get lost." They walked slowly through the park. Robert described everything he saw. The tall trees, the pigeons pecking at crumbs. On the ground, the man making giant soap bubbles. The girls listened with intense focus, turning their little heads toward each new sound. "Daddy, can I touch the tree?" Helen asked, reaching out a tentative hand. "Of course, my flower." Robert guided her to the trunk of a huge sycamore tree. Helen ran her hands over the rough bark, exploring every groove, every texture. Her sisters did the same, marveling at the tactile discovery. "It's different from the cherry tree at home," Julia observed. "It is. Every tree has its own texture, its own smell." They continued exploring the park. Robert bought popcorn from a vendor and let the girls feel the warm, crunchy kernels in their hands before eating them. They found a fountain, and Robert let them dip their fingers in the cool water. Every small experience was a revelation for the triplets, and for Robert as well. He realized he was afraid they would trip, that someone would accidentally push them, that they would be startled by a sudden noise. But he also realized his fear was different from Beatrice's. Hers was paralyzing, trapping them all. His was uncomfortable but surmountable. Suddenly, something extraordinary happened. All 3 girls stopped at the same time, as if they had heard or sensed something Robert couldn't perceive. They let go of his hands, and before he could react, they started to walk. No, they started to run, all 3 of them together, in a straight line, across the park. "Girls!" Robert shouted, running after them. "Stop, wait!" But they didn't stop, and the most incredible, most impossible thing was the way they ran. They weren't fumbling. They didn't stumble. They didn't bump into anything. They dodged people with a precision that defied all logic. A woman with a stroller, a group of teenagers, a dog on a leash. The girls evaded everything with fluid, natural movements, as if they could see perfectly. Robert ran after them, his heart pounding, not from exertion but from pure shock. What was happening? How could 3 blind girls do that? They ran to the other side of the park and stopped in front of a woman, an elderly woman in torn and worn clothes, sitting on a piece of cardboard on the ground. A homeless woman who held out her hands to the girls as if she knew them. "Grandma!" The 3 of them shouted in unison, throwing themselves into the woman's arms. Robert arrived out of breath, about to pull them away from this stranger, but he stopped. The girls were radiant, happier than he had ever seen them, and they were saying impossible things. "Grandma, I can see the flowers," Julia was saying, pointing to the nearby flower beds. "They're yellow and purple." "And that cloud looks like a rabbit," Sophia added, looking up at the sky she should never have been able to see. "Grandma, your clothes are torn here," Helen observed, touching the frayed fabric of the woman's dress. Robert was paralyzed. His blind daughters were describing colors, shapes, visual details, as if they could see, as if they had always been able to see. The homeless woman looked up at Robert with eyes that were both ancient and luminous. She smiled, a toothless but warm smile. "You must be their father," she said, her voice hoarse but gentle. "They're beautiful, just like my Eleanor." Robert felt the ground disappear from under his feet. Eleanor. This woman knew Eleanor. But how? Who was she? "Who are you?" he managed to ask, his voice strangled. "I'm Mrs. Agnes," the woman replied, running her hands through the triplets' hair with infinite tenderness. "I'm Eleanor's mother, the grandmother of these little girls, and finally, after so long, I've managed to find them." Robert looked at his daughters, at the homeless woman, at the park that suddenly seemed to have transformed into another world. Nothing made sense. Eleanor had never spoken of a mother. She had grown up in an orphanage, been adopted, and his blind daughters were describing clouds as if they could see them with perfect clarity. The world, Robert realized in that moment, was far more complex than he had ever imagined. And something was about to change, drastically in all of their lives. Robert couldn't process what was happening. The girls continued to chat animatedly with the homeless woman, touching her face, her grey and tangled hair, as if they had known her for years. And most disturbingly, they kept describing things they shouldn't be able to see. "Look, Grandma, there's a man over there selling red balloons," Sophia said, pointing accurately to a vendor about 20 yards away. "And that dog is brown with white spots," Helen added, turning her face toward a golden retriever walking past with its owner. Robert felt his legs give way. He found a nearby bench and sat down, unable to remain standing. This wasn't possible. It simply wasn't possible. Mrs. Agnes got up from the cardboard with some difficulty, her joints complaining from years spent on the hard streets. She was short, too thin, with deep wrinkles that told stories of suffering, but her eyes had a liveliness that contrasted with her worn-out appearance. "Are you all right, sir?" she asked, approaching Robert with the girls holding her hands. "All right?" Robert almost laughed at the question. How could he be all right when his entire reality had just been turned upside down? "Who are you?" he managed to ask again, trying to organize his thoughts. "How did you know Eleanor? And what's happening to my daughters?" Mrs. Agnes sighed and sat on the bench next to him. The girls settled at her feet, still beaming, still looking around as if the world were the most wonderful thing they had ever experienced. "It's a long story," the old woman began. "I gave birth to Eleanor when I was just 17. It was 1987. I was a scared girl with no family, no resources. The social workers convinced me that adoption would be best for her. They promised me she would go to a good family, that she would have opportunities I could never give her." Her voice trembled as she told that part. "I never wanted to give her up, but I was so young, so lost. I signed the papers and regretted it the very next second. I spent years searching, trying to find out what had happened to my daughter. The system wouldn't give me any information. They said it was a closed adoption, that I had no rights." Robert listened, fascinated despite the shock. Eleanor had never told him any of this. She spoke little of her childhood, only that she had grown up in an orphanage until she was adopted at 10. "When I finally managed to track her down," Mrs. Agnes continued, "it was through a social worker who took pity on me. He told me Eleanor was well, that she had been adopted by a good family, that she was in school, that she was happy. I was relieved, but I didn't approach her. I was afraid of disrupting her life, of causing problems. I was content just knowing she was okay. And then," her voice broke, "about 4 years ago someone told me she had been in an accident, a fatal accident. I was devastated. I looked for more information, but all I could find were rumors. I spent months unable to confirm anything, living with that terrible pain of uncertainty. That's when I discovered the truth." She looked at Robert with moist eyes. "Eleanor didn't die in an accident. She passed away during childbirth, giving birth to these 3 beautiful little girls. When I found out, I wanted to get close immediately, to meet my granddaughters, but I didn't know how. I had no documents to prove our relationship, no money for lawyers, and I was afraid they would send me away, that they would think I was trying to take advantage of a wealthy family." "So you found out where we lived?" Robert asked. "Not exactly, but I found out where the girls had their medical checkups, an office in Midtown. I started living near there, waiting, watching. I saw you pass by several times. The girls growing up, always with that serious woman, never alone, always so cared for, but so trapped." Robert swallowed hard. She was describing Beatrice perfectly. "And today you came here," Mrs. Agnes continued, a sad smile on her lips. "For the first time, you with them, without the other woman, and suddenly they felt it. I don't know how to explain it, but they felt me, and they ran straight to me." Robert looked at his daughters. Julia was playing with a twig she had found on the ground, examining it visually. Sophia was watching a passing couple, commenting on their clothes. Helen was staring intently at him, her eyes focused on his face in a way they never had before. "They can see," Robert said, his voice filled with disbelief and fear. "My blind daughters can see perfectly." "They were never really blind," Mrs. Agnes replied softly, "at least not physically." "What do you mean?" The old woman hesitated, choosing her words. "I went through something similar when I was young after they took Eleanor from me. I was blind for almost a year. I couldn't see anything, absolutely nothing. The doctors said my eyes were perfect, but I just couldn't see. It was only after a lot of therapy, a lot of emotional work, that they understood. My body was manifesting a pain my mind couldn't process. Psychosomatic blindness, they called it." Robert felt a chill run down his spine. Psychosomatic, a word he knew but had never associated with his daughters. "Are you saying my daughters have emotional blindness? That it's psychological?" "I'm saying that maybe you never investigated it properly. I'm saying that sometimes our bodies respond to trauma in ways we don't understand. And I'm saying that there's something about their presence with me that has unlocked what was trapped. Robert stood up abruptly, starting to pace. This was impossible. Dr. Harrison was a renowned professional. He had been following the girls since birth. He would have noticed if it wasn't real physical blindness, but a small voice inside him whispered, would he have? When the initial diagnosis was made, Eleanor was fighting for her life. He himself was in a state of shock. The babies were only days old. Was it a thorough diagnosis or a rushed one, made in the midst of chaos and pain? I need to take them to another doctor, Robert said, more to himself than to Mrs. Agnes. I need a second opinion. I need to understand what's happening. That's a good idea, the old woman agreed. But please don't take them from me yet. We've only just found each other. Robert looked at her. A homeless woman living in precarious conditions, claiming to be his daughter's grandmother. In any other circumstance, he would have called the police, taken the girls, and left. But there was something about this woman, a truth he couldn't deny, and the way the girls responded to her was undeniable. "Daddy," Julia called out. "Look, a blue bird." Robert looked where she was pointing. There was indeed a blue jay perched on a nearby branch. His blind daughter was seeing a bird, identifying its color, pointing precisely at it. "How is this possible?" he murmured. "Love does extraordinary things," Mrs. Agnes said. "I loved Eleanor more than anything, even without being able to raise her. That love passed on to her, and from her to these girls. It's a bond that transcends logical explanations." Robert didn't much believe in things that transcended logic. He was a man of business, of numbers, of cause and effect. But he was seeing the impossible happen before his very eyes. "I have to go," he said finally. "I need to think, I need to research, I need to understand." "Can I see them again?" Mrs. Agnes asked, and there was so much longing in her voice that Robert felt his heart soften. "Where do you live?" "Around here. I have a place where I sleep, under an overpass about 5 blocks from here." Robert took out his wallet and pulled out several bills. Before the woman could protest, he placed the money in her hand. "Find a better place to stay, a hotel, a boarding house, and give me a number where I can reach you." Mrs. Agnes looked at the money with wide eyes. It was more than she had seen in months. "You don't have to," she began. "Yes, I do. If you really are Eleanor's mother, then you are my daughter's grandmother, and I don't want their grandmother living on the streets." He took a business card from his pocket and wrote a number on the back. "This is my personal cell. Call me when you find a place. We'll see each other again soon, I promise." The girls said goodbye to Mrs. Agnes with tight hugs and promises to come back soon. As they started walking back to the car, Robert noticed something alarming. The further they got from the homeless woman, the more the girls reverted to their previous behavior. They began to fumble, to walk more slowly, to lose the visual confidence they had shown moments before. By the time they were about 50 yards away, they were no longer describing anything they saw. They were back to being the blind girls he knew. Robert looked back. Mrs. Agnes was still there, watching them leave, an old handkerchief dabbing at tears on her wrinkled face. That woman had some effect on the girls, something inexplicable but undeniable. In the car on the way home, the girls were quiet, quieter than Robert had ever known them to be. "Are you okay?" he asked. "We are," Julia replied. "But Daddy, why can't I see any more?" Robert's heart nearly stopped. "See." She had used the word "see," as if it was something she had done and then lost. "I don't know, my flower. But I'm going to find out. I promise I will find out." When they arrived home, Beatrice was already there. She noticed immediately that something was different. "What happened?" she asked, examining the girls as if looking for injuries. "I need to talk to you," Robert said, "now alone." They went to the study again. Robert told her everything: the encounter with the homeless woman, her claims of being Eleanor's mother, and most importantly, the impossible fact that the girls had been able to see. Beatrice turned pale. "That's impossible," she said, her voice trembling. "They're blind. They've always been blind. Dr. Harrison confirmed it dozens of times." Then how do you explain what I saw? They were describing colors, shapes, distances, with perfect accuracy. You must have imagined it, or they were guessing, using sounds and other senses. No, B, I know what I saw, and I'm going to find another doctor. I'm going to run every possible test, because if there's even the slightest chance that they aren't really blind, I need to know. Beatrice sat down heavily in the armchair. Her expression was that of someone whose world was collapsing. And maybe it was. Because if the girls weren't blind, it meant that for 3 years everyone had been living a lie with consequences that no one could yet fully comprehend. Robert didn't sleep that night. He stayed up researching psychosomatic blindness, conversion disorders, traumas that manifested as physical symptoms. The more he read, the more frightened he became, and the more convinced he was that he needed to investigate. On Monday morning, he cancelled all his meetings and started calling specialists. He wanted the best ophthalmologist in New York City, someone with experience in complex cases, someone who wasn't afraid to challenge previous diagnoses. He found Dr. Cecilia Monroe, a professor at Columbia University and an expert in neuro-ophthalmology. Her secretary said she was booked for months, but when Robert explained the urgency of the case and mentioned they were 4-year-old triplets with a diagnosis of congenital blindness that might be wrong, the doctor agreed to see them that same week. Robert called Beatrice. He needed her to take the girls for a consultation on Thursday. He expected resistance, but Beatrice agreed in a tired, defeated voice. She hadn't slept either. She was also questioning everything she had believed to be true. During those days of waiting, Robert tried to maintain a normal routine, but nothing was normal anymore. The girls asked questions about Grandma Agnes, wanting to know when they would see her again, and Robert didn't know what to answer. Mrs. Agnes had called the day after their meeting. She had found a room in a simple but clean boarding house near downtown. Robert promised to visit her soon, but first he needed to resolve this medical issue. On Thursday, Robert sent Beatrice home and took the girls to the appointment himself. Dr. Monroe's office was in a private hospital on the East Side. It was modern, equipped with state-of-the-art technology. The doctor was a woman in her 50s, her hair in a tight bun with strong prescription glasses and a penetrating gaze that seemed to see beyond the obvious. She greeted Robert and the girls with professional cordiality. "Mr. Ashford, I'll be honest, when I received your call I was intrigued. Congenital blindness is a serious diagnosis. For it to be wrong, there would have to have been gross negligence or very atypical circumstances. Tell me everything from the beginning," Robert told her. The complicated birth, Eleanor fighting for her life in the ICU, the premature but healthy babies in the incubator, the hasty diagnosis of congenital blindness made by Dr. Harrison when the girls were only 3 days old, Beatrice's acceptance of the diagnosis while he was in shock, the following 3 years of checkups that always confirmed the same thing, and then he told her about the encounter in the park, the homeless woman, the girls' impossible run, the precise visual descriptions, and how it all disappeared when they moved away from the woman. Dr. Monroe listened without interrupting, taking occasional notes. When Robert finished, she was silent for a long moment. "I'm going to examine the girls completely," she said finally. "I'll run every available test, but I need you to be prepared for what I might discover." "Prepared how?" "If your daughters are indeed not physically blind, it means that for 4 years they have lived with a misdiagnosis. The implications of that are profound, not just medically, but psychologically and legally." Robert swallowed hard. He had already thought about that. Dr. Harrison's responsibility, the way Beatrice had raised the girls, his own absence. Everything would be called into question. The examination lasted over 3 hours. Dr. Monroe used equipment Robert had never seen before, performed tests that seemed to be from science fiction. She examined not only the girls' eyes, but their neurological system, their reflexes, their responses to different stimuli. The triplets cooperated admirably. They were used to exams, although these were far more extensive. Julia asked constant questions about each device. Sophia made jokes about how the special glasses they had to wear made her look like an alien. Helen remained quiet but attentive, absorbing everything. Finally, Dr. Monroe asked Robert to come into her office alone while the girls stayed in the waiting room with a nurse. Robert sat down, his heart pounding. The doctor's expression was serious but not sad. It was thoughtful, as if she were assembling a complex puzzle. "Mr. Ashford, your daughters are not blind." Even though he had been expecting to hear it, even though he had seen it with his own eyes in the park, the words still shocked Robert. "They're not," he repeated, his voice a whisper. "Physically, their eyes are perfect, structurally normal, functionally capable. There is no congenital defect, no anomaly, nothing that would justify blindness." "Then how?" Robert began, but the doctor held up a hand. "Let me explain. What your daughters have is what we call cortical blindness, or, in this specific case, psychogenic blindness. It's a rare but documented condition where the patient doesn't process visual information, not because the eyes don't work, but because the brain blocks that information for psychological reasons." Robert struggled to understand. "How is that possible?" "They were infants when they were diagnosed. Infants don't have complex psychological traumas. Don't underestimate what infants can process emotionally. They were born in the midst of a crisis, their mother fighting for her life, their father in shock, the chaotic hospital environment. And then, when they were only days old, they were diagnosed as blind. Everyone around them began to treat them as blind. That treatment, that constant expectation, shaped their perception of themselves." The doctor got up and went to a bookshelf, pulling out a thick volume. "It's a well-studied phenomenon in psychology. Children are extremely sensitive to adult expectations. If everyone believes they are blind and treats them as such, they internalize it. Their brains, in a way, chose not to see to conform to the narrative that was imposed on them. But they use canes, they grope, they don't focus their eyes on anything," Robert protested. "Learned behaviors, reinforced by years of conditioning. They genuinely believe they are blind, so they act blind. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy." Robert ran his hands over his face, feeling the weight of this revelation. "And the homeless woman? Why can they see in her presence?" Dr. Monroe sat back down. "That's the most interesting part. From what you've described, this woman brought something that was missing from the girls' lives: spontaneous joy, unconditional acceptance, a deep emotional connection. In her presence, the psychological block temporarily dissolved. It was as if they finally felt safe enough to see." "So they can be cured?" "They can, but not with surgery or medication. They need therapy, a lot of psychological work. They need to unlearn what has been taught to them. And most importantly, they need a healthy emotional environment where they can feel safe to see." Robert felt tears burn his eyes. They were tears of relief, but also of profound guilt. 4 years. 4 years in which his daughters had lived in darkness, not because they had to, but because everyone around them believed they had to. "What do I do now?" he asked, his voice broken. "First, you need to tell them. Carefully, with therapeutic support, but you need to. Second, you need to reevaluate the entire family environment. The way they are treated, the expectations placed upon them. And third," the doctor hesitated, "you need to investigate how this initial diagnosis was made. Whether it was negligence, haste, or a genuine medical error. Either way, you need answers." Robert nodded, feeling the weight of everything that lay ahead. "And the woman, the homeless woman? Can she continue to see the girls?" "If she truly has this positive effect on them, yes. In fact, she could be an essential part of their therapy. But I want to meet her first, to assess the situation completely." In the following days, Robert plunged into a routine he hadn't known for years. He researched therapists specializing in childhood trauma, read articles on psychogenic blindness, and scheduled appointments with lawyers to understand his legal options against Dr. Harrison. But mostly, he spent time with his daughters. He talked with them, listened to their stories, their worries, their dreams, and he realized how much he had missed. They were bright, funny, profound children, and he barely knew them. Beatrice showed up at the house a few days after the consultation with Dr. Monroe. She looked as if she had aged years in just a few days. Robert met her in the study and told her everything the doctor had said. Beatrice listened in silence, tears streaming down her face. When Robert finished, she was quiet for a long time before she spoke. "I did this to them," she said finally, her voice broken. "I trapped them. I kept them in the dark. It wasn't just you, Bea. It was all of us. Me for being absent, Dr. Harrison for the wrong diagnosis, the system for not questioning it. We all failed. But I was there. Every day. I should have noticed, I should have questioned it. But I was so scared. Scared of losing them like I lost Eleanor. Scared the world would hurt them. So I kept them safe, but I also kept them trapped." Robert approached his sister-in-law and, for the first time in years, hugged her. They cried together, mourning the lost time, the wasted opportunities, the childhood the girls could have had. "We're going to fix this," Robert said. "I don't know how, but we will. The girls deserve to see the world, and we deserve a chance to do things differently," Beatrice agreed, wiping her tears. Robert realized that she, too, was a victim, in her own way. A victim of her own unresolved traumas, of her own paralyzing fear, of a story that had begun long before the girls were born. Later that night, Robert called Mrs. Agnes. They needed to talk, he said, about Eleanor, about the past, about the future. They arranged to meet the next day. Robert hung up the phone and looked out the window at the dark garden. Outside, the cherry tree that Eleanor had loved so much was laden with fruit that no one picked. Tomorrow, Robert decided he would take the girls to play there. With or without sight, they deserved to feel the grass under their feet, the sun on their faces, the wind in their hair. They deserved to be children. Finally, after so long, they deserved to live. Robert met Mrs. Agnes at a simple cafe near the boarding house where she was staying. The transformation in just a week was remarkable. She was clean, wearing new though modest clothes, her hair washed and combed. But what impressed Robert most was her posture. There was a dignity about her that life on the streets had not managed to completely erase. "Thank you for coming," she said when Robert sat down across from her. "And thank you for what you've done for me. It's been a long time since I slept in a real bed." Robert ordered coffee for both of them and waited for the waitress to leave before he began. "I need to know everything about Eleanor," he said. "Everything she never told me. Everything I should have asked but didn't." Mrs. Agnes sighed, stirring sugar into her coffee with slow movements. "Eleanor was a cheerful baby when she was born. I was living in a squat on the east side cleaning houses. I didn't have much, but I had love to give. She was my whole world. Why did you give her up then?" The old woman closed her eyes for a moment. "I didn't give her up willingly. The owner of the house where I worked found out I had a baby. She said she couldn't keep me employed if I kept bringing Eleanor in secret on the days I had no one to leave her with. I had two choices, my job or my daughter. I chose to seek help." She paused, the old pain still visible on her face. "The social workers were very persuasive. They said a baby couldn't grow up in a squat, that I was too young, that I didn't have the means. They promised me Eleanor would go to a good family, that she would be loved, that she would have opportunities. And I, naive and desperate, believed them. I signed the papers thinking I was doing what was best for her. And after. I spent years searching. I worked during the day and looked for information at night. The system didn't cooperate, closed adoptions, they said, confidentiality, they said, until I found that one social worker who sympathized with my story. He told me where Eleanor was, that she had been adopted, that she was well. He gave me the family's name, the neighborhood where they lived. Did you go there?" "I did. But I only watched from a distance. I saw Eleanor playing in the backyard, a girl of about 12, smiling, healthy. She was with other children, laughing. I realized she had a good life, a life I could never have given her. So I left. I continued to watch from afar, but I never approached. I didn't want to spoil her happiness by bringing back a painful past." Robert felt a tightness in his chest. Eleanor had never known she had a biological mother searching for her, never known she was loved by someone who had given up everything so she could have a better life. "And how did you find out about her marriage to me?" "Through a newspaper announcement. I saw her name in the weekend wedding section. I was so happy. My girl was getting married. I wanted to go to the wedding, just to watch from afar, but I didn't have the courage. Years later, I tried to find her again. That's when someone told me she had been in an accident. It took me months to find out the truth through hospital records. She hadn't died in an accident. She had given birth to triplets and passed away shortly after. Mrs. Agnes wiped away tears that ran down her wrinkled face. I felt like I had lost my daughter twice. First when I gave her up, then when I found out she was truly gone. And then I found out about the girls. 3 little granddaughters I would never know. Or so. Or, I thought. How did you find out about their blindness? I followed you. I watched from a distance. I saw the way the other woman treated them, always so carefully, as if they would break. I saw the canes, the dark glasses, all the paraphernalia. My heart broke. My granddaughters were blind, and I couldn't even comfort them. But you had your own suspicions about their blindness, didn't you? Mrs. Agnes nodded. Because of what happened to me. After they took Eleanor from me, I was blind for almost a year. The doctors didn't understand. My eyes were perfect, but I couldn't see anything. It was a psychologist who finally understood. It was my mind blocking my vision because the pain of losing my daughter was too great. The treatment was long and difficult, but eventually I could see again. So when you saw my daughters, you thought it could be the same thing. I suspected it. The way they sometimes moved, little moments where they seemed to react to visual stimuli, but then reverted to the pattern of blindness. I learned to recognize the signs because I had lived it, but I had no way to get close to confirm until that day in the park. Robert took a sip of his coffee, processing everything. How did you know they were going to the park that day? I didn't. I was there because I always am. It's near the medical office where they have their checkups. I stay around there hoping to see them, even from a distance. When I saw you with them, without the other woman, something inside me knew that was the moment. And then they felt me. I can't explain it, but it was like there was a connection, an invisible thread that linked us. Robert then told her about the consultation with Dr. Monroe, about the diagnosis of psychogenic blindness, about how the trauma of their birth and the subsequent emotional environment had created the block. Mrs. Agnes listened intently, nodding occasionally. It makes sense, she said when he finished. Trauma manifests in strange ways. I know that better than anyone. But the important thing is that now you know the truth. And you can help them. The doctor said you could be part of their therapy, that your presence could help unlock their vision permanently. I'll do anything for my granddaughters, anything. Robert hesitated before asking the next question. Do you have documents? Anything to prove your identity, your relationship with Eleanor? Mrs. Agnes lowered her eyes. I have almost nothing. I lost my documents years ago, living on the streets. But I have this. She opened a worn old purse she carried and took out a faded, yellowed photograph. It was of a baby girl, with big eyes and a toothless smile. On the back, in shaky handwriting, was written, Eleanor, 6 months. Robert took the photo carefully. The baby had the same eyes as the adult Eleanor, the same expression he saw in the triplets. It was the proof he needed, at least for his own heart. I'll help you get your documents back, he said, and if you're willing, I'd like you to live near us. Not in my house, if you're not comfortable, but close enough for the girls to see you regularly. Mrs. Agnes looked at him with wide eyes. You would do that for me? Why? Because Eleanor would have wanted it. Because the girls need it. And because, Robert admitted, I need it too. I need someone who knew Eleanor in a way I never did. Someone who can tell me about her. Help keep her alive for her daughters. In the following days, Robert hired a lawyer to help Mrs. Agnes recover her documents. They discovered she had a birth certificate, a baptismal certificate, enough proof of her identity. They also managed to confirm through old adoption records that she was indeed Eleanor's biological mother. Robert rented a small apartment 3 blocks from his house and furnished it modestly but comfortably. Mrs. Agnes cried when she saw it. It was the first real home she had had in decades. And then came the most difficult moment, telling the girls the truth. Robert, Beatrice, and Dr. Monroe, who had agreed to be present, sat with the triplets in the living room. The girls sensed that something important was about to happen. They were quiet, attentive, waiting. Girls, Robert began, his voice trembling, we have something very important to tell you. And I want you to listen to the end before you ask any questions, okay? Okay, Daddy, Julia replied, holding her sister's hands. Robert took a deep breath. You are not blind. Your eyes work perfectly. They always have. The silence that followed was absolute. The three girls sat completely still, processing words that contradicted everything they knew about themselves. But I can't see, Sophia said finally, her voice small and confused. I know, my flower, and I'm going to explain why. When you were born, your mummy got very sick. It was a very difficult and scary time. The doctors thought you couldn't see, and they told everyone that. And then everyone started treating you as if you couldn't see. They gave you canes, taught you to touch everything, always told you that you were blind. And because of that, Dr. Monroe continued in a gentle voice, your brains learned not to see. It's not your fault. It's not anyone's fault, really. It was a mistake that became true because everyone believed it. But I saw the flowers that day, Julia said slowly, in the park, with Grandma Agnes. I really saw them. Yes, you did, Robert confirmed. Because in that moment, you felt safe enough to see. Grandma's presence did something special. She brought joy and love without fear, and you, without realizing it, allowed your brains to see again. So we can see for real? Helen asked, and there was so much longing. In her voice it broke Robert's heart. Yes, you can, but it will take time. You'll need help, therapy, a lot of work. Your brains need to unlearn what they were taught. But yes, one day you will see. You will see the world. You will see colors. You will see my face, Auntie Bee's face, Grandma Agnes's face. The girls were silent for a long time. Then Sophia started to cry. They weren't sad tears, Robert realized. They were tears of relief, of hope, of possibility. I want to see, she said between sobs. I want to see everything. I want to see the sky, the trees, the flowers. I want to see you. And you will, Robert promised, hugging all three of them at once. I promise you will see. And this time I'll be here. I won't run away. I'll be here for every step of this journey. Beatrice also came closer, joining the group hug. Forgive your auntie, she said, her voice choked. I wanted to protect you, but I ended up imprisoning you. I'm going to do things differently now. I promise. In that collective embrace, crying together, the family that pain had fragmented began, finally, to rebuild itself. There was still a long road ahead, many therapy sessions, many challenges, but for the first time in 4 years, there was hope. And hope, Robert realized, was the light that would guide them all out of the darkness. The following weeks brought profound changes to Robert's house. Dr. Monroe had recommended a therapist specializing in childhood trauma, Dr. Amanda Foster, who began working with the triplets 3 times a week. The sessions were delicate, careful, designed to help the girls unlearn 4 years of conditioning. Robert drastically reduced his workload. He delegated projects, cancelled trips, and started working from home whenever possible. His partners were surprised by the change, but he didn't care. For the first time in years, his priorities were clear. The girls came first. Everything else could wait. Mrs. Agnes became a daily presence in the house. Initially hesitant, fearing she wouldn't be accepted, she soon realized the girls adored her unconditionally. They called her Grandma Agnes and wanted to be with her all the time. And something extraordinary happened whenever she was present. The girls would get glimpses of vision. It wasn't constant yet. They were flashes, brief moments where they would describe something visual before reverting to their usual blindness. But the therapist explained that this was normal, expected. Their brains were learning to trust their ability to see again. On a sunny morning, Robert took the girls and Mrs. Agnes to the garden. It was the first time they had truly explored the space Eleanor had loved so much. The cherry tree was laden with ripe, red fruit. "Grandma, what are those round things on the tree?" Julia asked, looking up. Robert and Mrs. Agnes exchanged hopeful glances. Julia was seeing the cherries, not just feeling or imagining, but actually seeing them. "Those are cherries, my flower," Mrs. Agnes replied, her voice thick with emotion. "Delicious fruits that your mother adored." "They're red," Sophia said, also looking up. dark red, almost black. Helen reached out her hand and, with a precision she wouldn't have had if she were blind, plucked a cherry directly from the branch. She looked at the fruit in her hand, really looked, focusing her eyes on it. "It's small and round," she said, amazed, "and shiny." Robert felt tears stream down his face. His daughters were seeing, slowly, in brief moments, but they were seeing. Clara came out of the kitchen carrying a basket. "Let's pick some," she suggested, smiling through her own tears. "We can make jam like your mother used to." The girls spent the entire morning in the garden, exploring with their hands and eyes. They touched flowers and described their colors. They watched butterflies and commented on their patterns. Each visual discovery was celebrated as the miracle it was. But not everything was easy. In the afternoon, when Mrs. Agnes left for her apartment, the girls returned to complete blindness. It was as if a light had been switched off. They went back to fumbling, using their canes, moving with that excessive caution. Robert saw the frustration on their little faces. "Why can I only see when Grandma is here?" Helen asked, her voice trembling. "Because you're still learning," he explained, kneeling down to their level. "It's like learning to walk. First you need support, but gradually you'll be able to do it on your own." "But I want to see now," Sophia protested. "I want to see all the time, not just sometimes." "I know, my flower, and you will. Dr. Amanda is helping with that, but it takes time and patience." That evening, Robert received an unexpected call. It was the lawyer he had hired to investigate the case against Dr. Harrison. "Mr. Ashford, we need to talk," the lawyer said. "I've discovered some things about your daughter's initial diagnosis." Robert went to his study, closing the door. "What did you find?" "The diagnosis was made in an extremely hasty manner. Your daughters were only 3 days old when they were labeled as blind. The tests conducted at the time were minimal, inadequate for such a serious diagnosis. And most importantly, there was no proper follow-up in the subsequent months. Dr. Harrison simply assumed the initial diagnosis was correct and never investigated further." Robert felt anger rise within him. So it was negligence. "It could be characterized as such, yes. We have grounds for a lawsuit, but I must warn you that it will be long, draining, and public. The media will certainly take an interest in the case." Robert thought about the girls, about how a public lawsuit would affect them, about how having to relive everything in court could harm their recovery. "I want to think about it," he said finally. "My priority right now is their healing. The rest can wait." "I understand, but you have 2 years to decide, so there's no need to rush." After he hung up, Robert stared out the window for a long time. Part of him wanted justice, wanted to hold Dr. Harrison accountable for the mistake that had cost his daughters 4 years of their lives. But another part, the part that was learning to prioritize emotional well-being over personal satisfaction, knew that a lawsuit could do more harm than good. Beatrice started her own therapy. It was Dr. Amanda's idea, who quickly realized that much of the girls' block was connected to their aunt's paralyzing anxiety. Beatrice resisted at first, but Robert convinced her. "You need to heal too," he told her, "not just for the girls, but for yourself." Beatrice's sessions revealed deep layers of trauma. Her childhood in the orphanage, where she had learned that the world was dangerous and that only hypervigilance kept one safe. The loss of Eleanor, which had reinforced her fear that carelessness led to tragedy. The compulsive need to control everything to avoid more pain. "I thought I was protecting them," she confessed to Robert, after a particularly difficult session. "But I was just repeating what was done to me. They kept me safe in the orphanage, but they also kept me trapped, and I did the same thing to the girls." Robert held his sister-in-law's hand. "Now you know, and you can do things differently." Slowly, Beatrice began to change. She still visited the girls regularly, but her presence was different, less controlling, less anxious. She let them explore, run, even fall and get hurt in the small ways that were a normal part of childhood. Every time she resisted the urge to overprotect, it was a victory. One day, about 2 months after the revelation, something extraordinary happened. Robert was working from home when he heard screams coming from the garden. He ran outside, his heart pounding, fearing the worst. But he found a completely different scene. Julia was standing under the cherry tree without her cane, looking around with eyes wide with wonder. "Daddy!" she shouted when she saw him. "I can see! By myself, without Grandma! I can see everything!" Robert froze, hardly daring to believe it. "Is it true, my flower? You can see now?" "I can. I see you. I see the house. See the blue sky. Daddy, the sky is so blue." Sophia and Helen ran to their sister's side, still fumbling, still blind. They wanted to see too. "Why only Julia?" Sophia asked, frustration evident in her voice. Clara called Dr. Amanda, who asked them to bring Julia to her office immediately. There the therapist examined the girl carefully. Julia described everything she saw in the office, pointed to objects, read large letters on posters. "This is a significant milestone," Dr. Amanda told Robert. "Julia has managed to break through the block completely, at least temporarily. It's as if she found the switch in her brain that controls vision and figured out how to turn it on." "But why only her?" Robert asked. "Why not all three?" "Each person processes trauma uniquely. Julia may have been the first to feel emotionally safe enough to see, or it could have been a specific trigger that only she experienced. Her sisters will follow the same path, but in their own time." And so it was. A week later, Sophia had her own moment. She was listening to music with headphones when she suddenly started shouting. She saw the colors of the furniture, the paintings on the walls, her own reflection in the mirror. 2 weeks later, it was Helen's turn. She was drawing something she did tactilely with special pencils on textured paper when she stopped. She lifted her head and looked out the window. "Daddy," she called, "there's a red bird outside. It's so beautiful." Robert cried. He cried with relief, with joy, with profound gratitude. His 3 daughters were seeing, not constantly yet. The vision came and went, but it was there, present, real. Mrs. Agnes was present for every milestone. She cried with them, hugged her granddaughters, told stories of Eleanor that now included visual descriptions the girls could finally process. The house that had been silent and somber for years was now filled with voices, laughter, life. One night, Robert was putting the girls to bed when Julia asked a question he had both feared and longed for. "Daddy, what did Mommy look like?" Robert picked up a photo of Eleanor from the nightstand. It was from their wedding. She was wearing a simple but elegant white dress, smiling that smile that could light up any room. "She was beautiful," he said, showing them the photo. "She had brown hair like you, curly and full, green eyes that sparkled when she laughed. And she laughed a lot. Your mother had the most beautiful laugh in the world." The 3 girls looked at the photo with deep concentration. It was the first time they had truly seen their mother's face. They touched the photograph with reverence, tracing the contours of Eleanor's face. "She looks like us," Sophia observed. "She does," Robert agreed. "You are her spitting image, and you have her joy, her strength, her capacity to love deeply." "Did she love us?" Helen asked quietly. "More than anything in the world," Robert answered, his voice thick with emotion. "She gave her life for you, literally. And I know that wherever she is happy watching you grow, watching you see, watching you live fully." That night, after the girls were asleep, Robert stood for a long time looking out their bedroom window. He thought of Eleanor, of how much she had missed by leaving so soon, but he also thought of how much she had left behind. 3 extraordinary girls, a family that was learning to truly love, a legacy of strength and resilience, and he realized that the greatest tribute he could pay to Eleanor was to ensure her daughters lived fully, that they saw the world in all its beauty and complexity, that they were free to explore, to make mistakes, to learn, to grow. This, Robert decided, would be his purpose from now on, not to build real estate empires, but to build full lives for his daughters, and this time he would not fail. With the girls' vision becoming more frequent and lasting, it was time to face the world beyond the mansion walls. Dr. Amanda suggested it was time to begin social integration. The girls needed to interact with other children, to experience the normal childhood situations they had been denied. Robert enrolled the triplets in a private preschool that had experience with inclusion. The director, Mrs. Marcia, a woman with grey hair and a kind gaze, listened to their whole story attentively. It was a unique case, she admitted, but she was willing to help. The first day of school was terrifying for everyone. Robert walked the three of them in hand, each carrying a new little backpack. They still used their canes for safety and out of habit, even though their vision was present that morning. "What if the other kids laugh at us?" Sophia asked in the car. "If they laugh, you remember that you are strong and special," Robert replied, "and that any child who laughs at another is only showing their own insecurity." In the classroom, the other 4- and 5-year-olds looked at the triplets with curiosity. The teacher, Marianne, young and energetic, introduced the girls naturally. "These are Julia, Sophia, and Helen. They are sisters and will be joining our class from today." "Why do they have canes?" a red-haired boy asked. "Because sometimes they need them," the teacher answered simply. "Just like some of you wear glasses and others don't. Everyone has their own needs." The simplicity of the explanation disarmed any strangeness. Soon the children were playing together, and the triplets, with their intermittent but increasingly reliable vision, participated in the activities with growing enthusiasm. Robert waited outside the school for that entire first morning, unable to leave. When he picked them up, he found 3 sweaty, disheveled, and absolutely radiant little girls. "Daddy, I made a friend," Julia announced. "Her name is Isabella, and she has a cat named Patches. And I played with a ball," Sophia added. "For real. I saw the ball coming and I kicked it." Helen, always more reserved, just smiled. But Robert saw in her eyes that she had enjoyed it too. It was a start. In the following weeks, the girls blossomed. Each day at school brought new experiences, new challenges, new successes. Yes, there were difficult moments, days when their vision failed in the middle of an activity, situations where other children asked uncomfortable questions. But Marianne was a sensitive and skillful teacher, and the triplets were learning to navigate this new world. At home, the dynamic was also changing. Beatrice, working hard in her own therapy, began to see patterns she had repeated her whole life. In one particularly painful session, she finally connected the dots. "I did to the girls what the orphanage did to me," she confessed to her therapist, tears streaming down her face. "I kept them safe but trapped, because that was the only form of love I knew, a love that suffocates because it's afraid of loss." "And now that you realize that," the therapist asked, "what will you do differently?" Beatrice thought for a long time before answering. "I'm going to learn to love without fear. I'm going to learn that trusting isn't abandoning, it's empowering. I'm going to learn that the people we love are not ours to control. They are free to live." She began to put these lessons into practice. When the girls played in the garden, she resisted the urge to shout, "Be careful," with every move. When Robert took them on outings, she didn't call 20 times asking if everything was okay. Each time she let go of a little control, she felt fear, but also relief. One day, Beatrice asked to speak with the girls. Robert and Mrs. Agnes were present, offering silent support. Beatrice knelt before the triplets, holding all 3 of their hands. "Girls, I need to apologize to you," she began, her voice trembling. "I thought I was protecting you, but I was trapping you. I was so afraid something bad would happen that I didn't let you live. And because of that, you spent years not seeing the world, even though you could." The girls were quiet, absorbing her words. "Auntie B, you were trying to take care of us," Julia said finally, "and we know that." "But in the wrong way," Beatrice continued. "And I hurt you with my fear. I'm learning to do things differently now. I'm learning that loving means letting go, not holding on." Sophia hugged her aunt tightly. "We love you, Auntie B, even when you were very worried." Helen and Julia joined the hug. Beatrice cried, but they were tears of liberation, not pain. It was as if, by asking for and receiving forgiveness, she too had been freed from invisible shackles she had carried since childhood. Mrs. Agnes watched it all with wisdom in her ancient eyes. She understood. She too had carried guilt for decades, had punished herself for choices made in desperation. Seeing this family learn to forgive each other and move forward was, in a way, her own healing. Robert began to think about the future. The girls were recovering wonderfully. But he knew there were other families going through similar situations. Traumas that manifested in physical symptoms, emotional pains that no one saw or understood. He talked with Dr. Monroe and Dr. Amanda about the idea of creating some kind of support center, a place where families dealing with trauma and grief could find help, understanding, and community. "It's a wonderful idea," Dr. Amanda said, "and you have the platform and the resources to make a real difference, but make sure you're doing it for the right reasons, not out of guilt." Robert reflected on that. Was it guilt that motivated him? Partially, he admitted to himself, but it was also a genuine desire to turn pain into purpose, to ensure that other children didn't go through what his daughters had. He began to research, to consult experts, to draw up plans. The project gradually took shape. It would be called the Eleanor Institute, in honor of his wife. It would offer subsidized therapy, support groups, workshops for parents, all focused on bereaved families and children with emotional trauma. Mrs. Agnes, when she heard about the project, immediately offered to help. "I can share my story," she said. "Show that even after losing everything, it's possible to rebuild, that love can heal even the deepest wounds." Robert accepted gratefully. Mrs. Agnes's participation would be essential. She represented hope, resilience, the living proof that it's never too late to reconnect, to heal, to start over. On a Saturday afternoon, the whole family was gathered in the garden. Robert, the girls, Beatrice, Mrs. Agnes, and Clara, who was now considered part of the family. They were having a picnic under the cherry tree, eating sandwiches and fruit, laughing at silly stories Mrs. Agnes told. Suddenly, Julia stood up and looked around attentively. She had no cane. She wasn't fumbling. She was simply looking, with confidence and clarity. "I can see everything," she said, amazed. "Everything, all the time. It's not going away." Robert felt his heart race. "Is it true, my flower? Is your vision permanent?" "It is." She looked at her sisters, at the adults, at the house in the background. "I see all of you. I see the tree. I see the sky, and I'm not afraid it will go away." In the following days, Sophia and Helen reported the same. Their vision was stabilizing. There were still moments of fogginess, of uncertainty, but they were becoming rarer. The psychological block was truly dissolving. Dr. Amanda confirmed it in her assessments. The girls had completely broken free from the conditioning. Their brains had relearned to trust their vision. They would still need therapy for some time, to process everything they had been through, but the psychogenic blindness was officially overcome. Robert scheduled a meeting with Dr. Harrison, not to sue, he had decided, but to confront. The doctor needed to know about his mistake, needed to understand the consequences of his hasty diagnosis. Dr. Harrison received him in his office, clearly uncomfortable. "I heard your daughters can see," he said before Robert could begin. "It's extraordinary. I've never seen anything like it." "It wasn't extraordinary," Robert replied, keeping his voice calm but firm. "It was predictable. If you had made a proper diagnosis from the beginning, if you had investigated thoroughly instead of making assumptions, my daughters would not have lost 4 years of their lives." The doctor turned pale. "Mr. Ashford, he began, but Robert cut him off. "I didn't come here to sue you, although I have every right to. I came because you need to learn from this. You need to understand that hasty diagnoses have real consequences on real lives. My family was almost destroyed because of your negligence." Dr. Harrison lowered his head, visibly shaken. "I'm sorry. I am genuinely sorry." "I hope you are," Robert said, standing up to leave, "and I hope you never do this to another family again." He left the office feeling lighter. It wasn't about revenge or punishment. It was about accountability, about ensuring that mistake wouldn't be repeated, and about closing a painful chapter so he could fully move on. That night, at home, Robert gathered his daughters in the living room. "Girls, I have a proposal," he said. "I'm thinking of creating a special place, an institute, where we can help other families who are going through difficult times. And I'd like you to be a part of it when you're ready, by sharing your story, by showing that it's possible to overcome even the most difficult situations." The 3 girls looked at each other, that silent communication that only very close sisters share. Then Julia spoke for all of them. We want to help, Daddy. If our story can make other kids feel better, we want to tell it. Robert hugged the three of them, pride flooding his chest. His daughters, only 4 years old and having already overcome so much, wanted to use their pain to help others. Eleanor would have been so proud, he thought, so deeply proud. 6 months after the revelation, the Eleanor Institute began to set a concrete shape. Robert bought an old townhouse in Greenwich Village, a beautiful building that needed renovations but had soul. Mrs. Agnes, upon seeing the place for the first time, cried. "Eleanor would have loved this place," she said, touching the walls with reverence. The renovation took 3 months. Robert worked with the architects to ensure every detail was perfect. Cozy therapy rooms filled with natural light, a library with books on grief and recovery, an indoor garden where children could play and families could find peace, and at the center of it all, a mural with a photo of Eleanor, smiling that smile that could light up any room. Dr. Amanda accepted the invitation to be the Institute's clinical director. Beatrice, after much therapy and personal growth, offered to coordinate the support groups. She understood better than anyone what it was like to live with unresolved trauma, how fear could imprison as much as any physical chain. Mrs. Agnes became the senior advisor, a title she initially found amusing. "I'm just an old woman who's lived a lot and learned a few things," she protested. But Robert insisted. Her life wisdom, her ability to find hope in the most desperate situations, was exactly what the Institute needed. The first family to seek help at the Institute arrived a week before the official opening. It was a young couple with a 6-year-old boy who had stopped speaking after his grandmother, who had raised him while his parents worked, passed away suddenly. Selective mutism, the doctors called it, but no one had been able to truly help him. Robert received the family personally. He told his own story, the story of the triplets. The boy, Lucas, listened with intense focus. When Robert finished, the boy gestured for a pen and paper. He wrote in shaky letters. "Did they see again?" "Yes, they did," Robert confirmed, "and you will speak again, but in your own time, when your heart is ready." Lucas started coming to the Institute 3 times a week. He worked with Dr. Amanda, participated in art therapy sessions, and spent time in the garden with Mrs. Agnes, who told him stories without expecting verbal responses. And slowly, the boy began to open up. The triplets met Lucas on one of these visits. They came to the Institute regularly now, familiarizing themselves with the space that would carry their story to other families. Julia approached the boy with her characteristic lack of shyness. "Hi, I'm Julia. Those are my sisters, Sophia and Helen. We couldn't see before, but now we can. It's cool to see things for the first time." Lucas looked at her with curiosity. He wrote in his notebook, "How did you do it?" "It was hard," Sophia replied, reading over Julia's shoulder. "We had to learn to trust our eyes again. But people helped. And now we're here to help you too." Helen, always the most perceptive, knelt beside Lucas. "It must be scary not to be able to talk. We were scared when we couldn't see, but it got better, and it will get better for you too." Something changed in Lucas that day. Maybe it was seeing children who understood what it was like to have something broken inside and still carry on. Maybe it was the genuine hope they offered. But 2 weeks later, during a session with Dr. Amanda, Lucas said his first word in 8 months. It was just a whisper, almost inaudible, but it was there. "Thanks." The news spread through the Institute like wildfire, not because Lucas's mutism was cured, there was still a long way to go, but because it represented hope. Change was possible. Healing was real. More families began to seek out the Institute. A father who had lost his wife and couldn't connect with his teenage son. A grandmother raising 3 orphaned grandchildren and feeling overwhelmed. A couple whose child had developed severe anxiety after witnessing an accident. Each story was unique, each pain was particular, but they all shared something: the need to be seen, heard, and understood. Beatrice found her purpose in the support groups. She facilitated weekly meetings where caregivers could share their struggles, without judgment. In one of these sessions, she shared her own story publicly for the first time. "I grew up in an orphanage," she began. her voice steady despite her tears. "I learned that the world was dangerous, that I had to be hyper-vigilant to survive. When my sister, the only family I had, passed away, that fear turned into obsessive control. I thought I was protecting my nieces, but I was imprisoning them." The other people in the group listened attentively. Many identified, many had their own versions of that pattern. "I learned," Beatrice continued, "that true love isn't about controlling or overprotecting. It's about trusting. It's about giving the people we love the tools to face the world, not isolating them from it. It's about being present without suffocating." A woman in the group, who was struggling to let her teenage daughter have more independence, asked, "But how do you let go when you're so afraid?" Beatrice thought before answering. "It's not about not being afraid. I'm still afraid every day, but I've learned that my fear cannot be someone else's prison. So I feel the fear, I acknowledge it, and then I choose to trust anyway. It's a daily choice, sometimes an hourly one, but it gets easier with time." After that session, several group members approached Beatrice individually. They wanted to thank her, to tell their own stories, to find that human connection that is only possible when someone is vulnerable enough to show their own scars. Mrs. Agnes worked mainly with grandmothers and mother figures at the Institute. She understood the particular pain of being separated from someone you love, of carrying guilt for past choices. In her sessions, which were more like conversations than formal therapy, she shared the wisdom accumulated over decades of life. "Pain is part of life," she often said. "We can't avoid it completely, but we can choose what we do with it. We can let it harden and close us off, or we can let it open us up and make us more compassionate." One of the grandmothers who came regularly, Mrs. Vera, was raising 2 grandchildren after her son had abandoned the family. She was exhausted, resentful, lost. In her conversations with Mrs. Agnes, she began to process not only her current situation, but old grievances with her son that she had never resolved. "I love him," Mrs. Vera confessed in one session, "but I'm also so angry with him. How could he abandon his own children?" Agnes held the other woman's hand. "You can feel both things at once, love and anger. They can coexist. And when you're ready, you can choose to release the anger, not for your son, but for yourself, because carrying that weight is stealing your joy with your grandchildren." It took time, but Mrs. Vera eventually managed it. And when she did, her entire dynamic with her grandchildren changed. She had more energy, more patience, more capacity to truly enjoy them instead of just surviving each day. The triplets continued to come to the Institute, interacting with other children, sharing their experiences. They became symbols of hope, little beacons showing that recovery was possible. But Robert was careful not to overwhelm them. They were still children. They still needed time to just play and be. One afternoon, Robert found the girls in the Institute's garden talking to a new girl, Laura, who had developed severe nervous tics after losing her father. The triplets were showing her the flower bed they had helped plant. "See these flowers," Julia was saying. "When we planted them, they were just tiny seeds. We didn't know if they would grow, but we watered them every day, waited patiently, and look, now they're beautiful." Sophia added, "You're kind of like a seed too. You're going through a tough time now, but with care and time, you'll bloom again." Helen, holding Laura's hand, completed, "And you don't have to bloom alone. There are a lot of people here to help you. We couldn't do it alone either." Robert watched from a distance, with tears in his eyes. His daughters, so small yet so wise, were doing exactly what Eleanor would have done. Bringing light to dark places, offering hope where there was despair, showing that love could heal even the deepest wounds. That night, gathered with the Institute's team to review the first few months, Robert shared his observations. "We're making a real difference," he said. "Every family that leaves here a little lighter, a little more hopeful, is a victory." Beatrice agreed. "And it's not just for those who come for help. We, the team, are healing too. I certainly am. Every person I help let go of control helps me let go of my own." Mrs. Agnes, ever. Pragmatic, reminded them, "But we can't save everyone. Some people aren't ready. Others need more help than we can offer. And that's okay. Our job is to plant seeds, Growth happens in each person's own time. Dr. Amanda added something important. What we're doing here is creating community. We're showing people they aren't alone in their struggles, and that this human connection is as healing as any formal therapy. Robert looked around the table. Beatrice, who had learned to love without suffocating. Mrs. Agnes, who had turned decades of pain into compassionate wisdom. Dr. Amanda, who dedicated her life to helping others heal. And outside in the garden, visible through the window, his 3 daughters playing under the stars, seeing the world with eyes that were finally completely open. Eleanor, he thought, I hope wherever you are you can see this. Your name, your legacy touching lives, your daughters flourishing, your family healed and whole, finally. You're not here physically, but you are present in every act of love, in every moment of healing, in every second of hope we offer. And I promise to continue this work. For you, for the girls, and for all the families who will yet come to us. 1 year after the Institute opened, the Ashford family's life had completely transformed. The triplets, now 5, were fully integrated into regular school. The psychogenic blindness was officially a thing of the past. They could see perfectly without hesitation or lapses, but they carried the wisdom of those who had known both darkness and light. Robert had further reduced his involvement with his company, promoting a partner to CEO and taking on an advisory role. His true passion was now the Institute. He spent entire days there, meeting families, listening to stories, witnessing transformations. The Institute had grown beyond initial expectations. There was a waiting list for the support groups. The team of therapists had tripled, and the impact was spreading in concentric circles. Each family helped bringing hope to their own communities. On a Saturday morning, the Institute hosted a special event, an open house where families who had been through the program could return and share their stories of recovery. The idea was to show new families that healing was not just possible, but probable with the right support. Lucas, the boy who had arrived at the Institute unable to speak, was among those who returned. He now spoke normally, perhaps too much according to his mother, who joked about how he never stopped asking questions. Lucas asked to speak at the event, and Robert agreed. The boy, now 7, stepped onto the small stage set up in the garden. There were about 50 people present, including several children. Lucas held the microphone with hands that no longer trembled. When I came here, I couldn't talk, he began, his voice clear and steady. It wasn't that I didn't want to, it was like the words were stuck inside me. Dr. Amanda said it was because my heart was so full of sadness that there was no room for anything else. He paused, looking at the audience. But here I met people who understood me. Grandma Agnes told me stories and never got mad because I didn't answer. Auntie Beatrice showed me it was okay to be scared, and the triplets showed me that broken things can be fixed. The girls sitting in the front row smiled at him. Lucas continued. I still get sad sometimes when I remember my grandma, but the sadness doesn't trap me anymore. I can feel it and still live. And that's what I learned here. That feeling pain doesn't mean you're broken. It means you're human. The audience applauded, many with tears in their eyes. Lucas stepped down from the stage and went straight to Mrs. Agnes, hugging her tightly. Thank you for listening to me when I had no words, he said. Other families shared their stories. Mrs. Vera spoke about learning to raise her grandchildren without resentment. A teenager talked about overcoming debilitating anxiety after witnessing an accident. A mother described how the Institute had helped her process the loss of her husband and reconnect with the children she had been pushing away in her grief. When it was the triplets' turn, they went up on stage together. Julia held the microphone, but all 3 spoke, alternating naturally. We don't remember when we couldn't see, Julia began. We were too little, but we remember starting to see again. Sophia continued. It was scary at first. The world was so big, so full of things, but it was also beautiful. The colors, the shapes, the faces of the people we loved. Helen completed. Our daddy says we were born with perfect eyes, but our hearts were too scared to let us see. So our job was to heal our hearts, not our eyes. The 3 spoke in unison, something they had rehearsed. And if our hearts could heal, yours can too. It just takes time, help, and a lot of love. The audience erupted in applause. Robert, watching from the side of the stage, felt pride flood his chest. His girls, so young but so brave, were sharing their vulnerability to help others. They were exactly the kind of people Eleanor would have raised. After the event, as families socialized in the garden, Robert found Beatrice talking with a new mother in the program. The woman was clearly struggling, her shoulders tense, her face marked with worry. "I just want to protect my son," the woman was saying. "The world is so dangerous. How can I let him go out knowing everything that can go wrong?" Beatrice took the woman's hands. "I understand, believe me, I understand more than you can imagine. But can I tell you something I learned the hard way? When we overprotect, we're not saving our children from danger, we're preventing them from learning how to navigate danger. And that, in the long run, leaves them more vulnerable, not less." The woman listened, still hesitant. Beatrice continued, "I'm not saying to throw your son into the world without support. I'm saying to give him tools, not chains. Teach, don't isolate. Trust, don't control. It's terrifying, I know. I do it every day with my nieces and it's still scary. But I see them flourishing in ways they never could have if I had kept them trapped." The woman began to cry, and Beatrice hugged her. "It's not easy," Beatrice whispered. "No one is saying it is. But you're not alone. That's what we're here for." Mrs. Agnes was in her element, circulating among the groups, offering words of encouragement, sharing stories. A young mother who had just lost her own mother was particularly devastated. "I don't know how I'm going to raise my daughter without my mum to guide me," she cried. Agnes sat beside her. "Your mother is inside you," she said gently. "Everything she taught you, all the values she passed on, all the ways she showed you love, are right here." She touched the young mother's chest. "You haven't lost her. She has just changed form. Now she lives through you." The young mother looked at Agnes. "How can you be so wise?" Agnes laughed, a sound full of warmth. "Wise? I don't know about that. I've just lived a long time and made a lot of mistakes. Wisdom comes from learning from your mistakes and deciding to do better next time." Robert watched it all with deep satisfaction. The Institute was doing exactly what he had hoped, creating community, offering support, showing that healing was possible. But more than that, it was giving purpose to pain, transforming tragedy into legacy. Clara, who now also worked part-time at the Institute coordinating the community kitchen, appeared beside Robert. "A beautiful event, Mr. Ashford," she said. "Eleanor would be so proud." "I hope so," Robert replied. "I still talk to her sometimes, you know. I tell her about the girls, about the Institute, about everything. I don't know if she hears me, but it feels good to believe she does." Clara smiled. "She hears you, I'm sure of it. And she's smiling wherever she is." That night, after everyone had gone home and the Institute was quiet, Robert walked through the empty corridors. He stopped in front of the mural with Eleanor's photo. "We did it, my love," he said quietly. "The girls are okay. More than okay, they're flourishing. Beatrice has found peace, and we're helping so many other families. You would be proud of all this." He felt a gentle breeze come in through the window, rustling the leaves of a nearby plant. It wasn't Eleanor, Robert knew it wasn't. But he liked to think it was the universe responding, saying that yes, she was proud, that he was doing good, that it was okay to move forward without forgetting. At home he put the girls to bed. They were exhausted, but happy. "Daddy," Helen asked, "did we help people today?" "You helped a lot, my flower. You showed them that healing is possible, that no matter how dark it seems now, there's always hope for light." Julia yawned. "Then it was worth it. Everything we went through. If it helped other people, it was worth it." Sophia added sleepily, "Mommy would have done the same thing, right? If she were here." Robert kissed each of their foreheads. "She would have. Your mother had the biggest heart in the world, and you inherited that from her." He left their room and went downstairs to the living room. He sat on the sofa where he used to sit with Eleanor, where they planned their future, where they dreamed of the family they would build. So much had gone wrong. The birth that took Eleanor, the misdiagnosis, the lost years. But so much had also gone right. The girls were healthy, the family was healed, and Eleanor's legacy lived on, touching lives she never knew. Robert picked up his phone and wrote a note in the app where he kept a journal. "Today was a good day," he wrote. "The Institute is growing. The girls are shining, and I finally understand what you always knew, Eleanor. That love is the only thing that really matters. Not real estate empires, not bank accounts, not social status. Just love. Love that heals, love that connects, love that transforms. Thank you for teaching me that, even if it took your leaving for me to truly learn." He saved the note and turned off the lights. Tomorrow would be another day, with new challenges, new families seeking help, new moments of growth. But for tonight, Robert was at peace. He was where he needed to be, doing what he needed to do, and that, he realized, was all that really mattered. 2 years had passed since that transformative day in Washington Square Park. The triplets were now 6 in the first grade, and no one who met them today would guess they had once been diagnosed as blind. They ran, played, read, and drew with all the confidence of children who had always been able to see. But something set them apart from other children their age. There was a depth in their eyes, an understanding of pain and recovery that only came from lived experience. And there was an extraordinary compassion, an ability to sense when someone was hurting and offer comfort in ways children usually didn't know how. Robert was unrecognizable from the man he had been 3 years prior. The workaholic executive who hid in his work to avoid feeling had given way to a present father, an engaged community leader, a man who understood that true success wasn't measured in financial numbers, but in lives touched. He spent mornings having breakfast with his daughters, afternoons at the Institute, and evenings reading stories before bed. The company still thrived, but it was no longer the center of his existence. Beatrice had completed 3 years of intensive therapy. The work wasn't over. It probably never would be completely, but she was unrecognizable from the anxious, controlling woman she had been. She had learned to breathe when the anxiety came, to question her impulses to overprotect, to trust that the people she loved could take care of themselves, and her work at the Institute had flourished. She now supervised 5 different support groups, mentored new facilitators, and was recognized as one of the state's leading voices in family trauma therapy. Mrs. Agnes, at 72, had more energy than many people decades younger. She woke up early every morning, walked to Robert's house for breakfast with her granddaughters, spent the day at the Institute talking with families, and returned to her apartment at night, satisfied with a day well lived. The decades of pain and loss had transformed into wisdom and compassion. She often said that the worst years of her life had prepared her for the best. On a Sunday afternoon, the entire family was gathered at Robert's house. They did this weekly now, a sacred ritual. Robert, the triplets, Beatrice, Mrs. Agnes, and Clara, who was considered as much a part of the family as any blood tie. They were in the garden, under the cherry tree Eleanor had loved so much. The tree was heavy with fruit, and the girls took turns climbing a ladder to pick the highest ones. Robert watched with a heart full of love and gratitude. 3 years ago, he would have been terrified to let them climb. Now he stayed nearby for safety, but he let them explore, take calculated risks, live. "Grandma," Julia called from the top of the ladder, "tell me again about when you were young and lived near the Hudson River." Agnes smiled, settling into her chair. It was a story she had told dozens of times, but the girls never tired of it. "The river was clean then," she began, "clear as crystal. We used to swim in it, catch minnows with makeshift nets." "And Mommy never knew that story?" asked Sophia, who loved connecting the pieces of Eleanor's life puzzle. "No, my flower. Your mother and I had so little time together. There are so many stories I never got to tell her, but I tell them to you, and so she lives on through these memories." Helen climbed down the ladder and went to sit on Mrs. Agnes's lap. "I like it when you tell stories. It makes me feel like Mommy is close." "She is, my dear. She's in each of you. In the way Julia laughs, in Sophia's curiosity, in Helen's sensitivity. She is here, always." Beatrice, who was helping Clara prepare lunch in the kitchen, came out to the garden carrying a pitcher of cherry juice. "We made this with last week's fruit," she announced. "Try it and tell me what you think." The girls ran to get cups, and soon everyone was sipping the sweet red juice. "It's perfect," Robert declared. "Eleanor would have loved it." There was a time when mentioning Eleanor brought only pain. Now it brought sweet nostalgia, cherished memories, a presence felt rather than an absence mourned. The family had learned that honoring someone who had passed didn't mean living in perpetual grief, but celebrating what was shared and carrying forward the best of that person. "Robert, can I ask you something?" Beatrice said, sitting beside him. "Have you ever thought about meeting someone? Starting over?" The question caught Robert by surprise. He hadn't really thought about it. He had been so focused on the girls, the institute, their collective healing, that romance seemed distant, irrelevant. "I don't know," he answered honestly. "I feel like I still love Eleanor. I always will." Beatrice nodded. "I know, and she will always have that special place. But love isn't finite, Robert. You can honor what you had with Eleanor and still make room for someone new. When and if you're ready, of course." Robert thought about it. It was true that there were nights when the house felt too big, too empty after the girls were asleep. It was true that he sometimes longed for adult conversation, for connection, for companionship, but he also knew he was in no rush. If it happened, it would happen. For now, he had a rich and full life. The girls started a game of tag, their laughter filling the garden. Clara and Mrs. Agnes were discussing a new recipe they wanted to try. Beatrice was flipping through a therapy book she was reading, and Robert just watched, soaking in this moment of peace and fullness. Later, after lunch, while the girls were napping and the adults were having coffee in the living room, Beatrice shared some news. "I've been invited to give a keynote speech at a psychology conference in Washington, D.C., about our work at the Institute, about the model we've developed." "That's wonderful, Bea," Robert exclaimed. "Are you going to accept?" "I am. It's scary but also exciting. I want more people to know what's possible, that traumas can be healed, that families can be rebuilt." Mrs. Agnes added, "And you're the perfect person to tell that story. You've lived it. You know where you came from and where you've arrived." "We all lived it," Beatrice corrected. "It's our collective story. Robert choosing to be present, Mrs. Agnes bringing the healing, the girls having the courage to see again, me learning to let go. We each played a part." Robert reflected on that. It was true. There were no single heroes on this journey, just imperfect people doing the best they could, supporting each other, growing together. And perhaps that was the most important lesson the Institute taught, that healing wasn't individual, but communal, that no one overcame trauma alone. It was the connections, the support, the shared love that made it possible to move forward. At the end of the afternoon, before everyone left, Robert asked them to gather in the garden. "I want to propose something," he said. "A new ritual. Every Sunday, when we're together like this, let's each share one good thing that happened during the week, something we're grateful for, to remind us to appreciate the present instead of just mourning the past or fearing the future." Everyone agreed. Robert started. "I'm grateful for this family, for every person here, for how we've all changed and grown together." Beatrice was next. "I'm grateful for a second chance, for being able to do things differently, to be different, for forgiveness, both receiving and giving." Mrs. Agnes had tears in her eyes. "I'm grateful for finding my granddaughters, for getting to know them, love them, be part of their lives. It's more than I ever imagined possible." Clara, usually quiet, spoke with emotion. "I'm grateful to be part of this family. You've given me purpose, you've given me a home, you've given me love. I don't have my own children, but I have you, and it's more than enough." The triplets spoke one by one. Julia said, "I'm grateful I can see everything. The colors, the stars, the faces of the people I love." Sophia added, "I'm grateful for my sisters, for never being alone, even in the hard times." Helen completed, "I'm grateful for Grandma Agnes, for finding us and showing us we could see again." That night, after everyone had left and the girls were asleep, Robert sat in his study and opened his laptop. He began to write, documenting the journey they had lived. He didn't know if anyone would ever read it, didn't know if he would publish it or just keep it for the girls to read when they were older. But he needed to record it. He needed to ensure that this story of pain turned to purpose, of darkness turned to light, of a broken family made whole, would not be lost. He wrote about Eleanor, about who she was and the legacy she left, about the misdiagnosis and the lost years, about Mrs. Agnes appearing when they least expected it and changing everything, about the blindness that was not physical but emotional, and how love, patience, and proper support could heal it. About Beatrice learning to let go, about himself learning to be present, about the girls learning to trust their own vision. And as he wrote, he realized something fundamental. This wasn't just his family's story. It was the story of anyone who had ever faced trauma and tried to find their way back to the light. It was universal in its specificity, particular in its universality. It was, in the end, a story about hope. And hope, Robert now understood, was the most important thing he could offer the world. 3 years after that transformative encounter in the park, the Eleanor Institute had expanded beyond what Robert had ever imagined. The original townhouse in Greenwich Village was now joined by 2 satellite locations, one on the east side and another downtown. Hundreds of families had been through the programs, and the stories of transformation multiplied like ripples spreading from a stone dropped in water. The Institute organized a grand anniversary event. It wasn't just a celebration of the program's success, but a recognition of all the families who had been part of that collective journey of healing. The main garden was decorated with colorful banners, tables laden with food, and a stage where people would share their stories. The triplets, now 7, were helping to organize. Julia was on the welcome committee, making sure every arriving family felt included. Sophia was coordinating the children's activities, creating games and activities she had invented herself. Helen was working with Mrs. Agnes in the sensory garden, a space they had created specifically for children with different sensory needs. Robert watched his daughters with infinite admiration. They had grown so much, not just physically, but emotionally and spiritually. They were wise, compassionate, aware children in a way that defied their young age. And they were happy, genuinely, radiantly, and completely happy. Beatrice arrived with a group of facilitators she had personally trained. Her work had gained national recognition. She had published articles, given lectures at universities, and become a leading expert in family trauma therapy. But she never lost her humility, never forgot where she came from. Every week she still facilitated at least one support group, staying connected to the grassroots work that was the soul of the Institute. Mrs. Agnes was radiant in a new dress her granddaughters had helped her choose. At 75, she had more vitality than many younger people. Her apartment, which Robert had helped furnish years ago, was always full of visitors, people from the Institute who needed advice, families who wanted her comforting presence, and her granddaughters who visited almost daily. She often said these were the fullest years of her life, that all her previous suffering had gained meaning in retrospect. The event began with Robert on stage. He looked out at the crowd, at the hundreds of faces representing stories of pain transformed into hope, and felt emotion tighten his throat. 3 years ago, I started this institute in memory of my wife Eleanor, he began. She passed away giving birth to our triplets, and that loss broke our family in ways it took me years to recognize. My daughters were misdiagnosed as blind, and we lived in both literal and metaphorical darkness for a long time. He paused, finding Mrs. Agnes in the crowd. But then an extraordinary woman entered our lives, a woman society didn't see, who lived on the streets, who had nothing material to offer. And it was she who showed us that genuine love, true presence, and unconditional acceptance could heal even the deepest wounds. Mrs. Agnes wiped away tears as the crowd applauded. Robert continued, "What I've learned in these years is that we all carry blindnesses, not necessarily physical but emotional, psychological, spiritual. We refuse to see our own pain, the pain of those around us, the possibilities for healing that exist. And the work of the Eleanor Institute is to help people see again, to see themselves, their families, their potential for recovery." The triplets came up on stage, and Robert hugged them. "These are my daughters, Julia, Sophia, and Helen. They have known both darkness and light, and they have chosen to use their experience to help other children. They are my daily inspiration." Julia took the microphone. "We want to tell all the kids here something important," she said. "If you're going through something hard right now, if you're sad or scared or confused, know that it won't be like this forever. Things can get better. We're proof of that." Sophia added, "And you don't have to go through it alone. There are people who want to help. Here at the Institute, in your family, in your community. Let people help." Helen completed, "And remember that being strong doesn't mean not feeling pain. It means feeling the pain and keeping going anyway. It means asking for help when you need it. It means not giving up even when it's hard." The crowd rose in a standing ovation. The girls came down from the stage and were hugged by dozens of children they had met at the Institute, each with their own story of recovery. Beatrice spoke next, sharing her journey from hyper-protection to trust, from control to liberation. "I thought love meant protecting at all costs," she said. "But I've learned that true love means giving people the tools to protect themselves, not being their protection. It means trusting, not controlling." Mrs. Agnes was the last to speak. She walked slowly onto the stage, leaning on a decorative cane her granddaughters had given her. "I'm 75 years old and I've lived many lives," she began, her voice still strong. "I lost my daughter twice. I lived on the streets for years. I experienced pain that I thought would destroy me. But I'm here, whole, happy, useful, and if I can rebuild myself, anyone can." She looked directly at the audience. "It doesn't matter what you've lost. It doesn't matter how deep the pain is. There is always a possibility to start over. There is always hope, and here, in this institute, in this community we've built together, you will find the support to do just that." The event continued through the afternoon. Families shared food, children played together, adults exchanged stories and contact information. There was an energy in the air, a palpable sense of community and belonging. At the end of the day, as the sun began to set, Robert gathered his family in the garden under the cherry tree. The triplets were tired but happy, nestled between Robert, Beatrice, and Mrs. Agnes. Clara brought out hot tea and cookies she had made especially for the moment. "It was a good day," Robert said, more a statement than a question. "It was the best day," Julia corrected. "We helped so many people. And we learned so much too," Sophia added. "Every story we hear teaches us something new." Helen, always the most contemplative, said, "I think Mommy would be proud. Of the Institute, of us, of everything." Robert looked up at the sky, which was beginning to darken, stars appearing one by one. "I think so too, my flower. I think so too." Mrs. Agnes held Robert's hand. "My daughter Eleanor brought so much good into the world even in her brief time, and you, Robert, have ensured that good continues to multiply. The Institute is her legacy, but it's also yours." "It's not mine," Robert corrected. "It's ours. All of ours. Every person who has come through here, shared their story, found healing, offered support. We are a community. And communities don't have owners. They have members." Beatrice raised her teacup. "A toast, then, to Eleanor, who gave us the example. To Agnes, who showed us the way. To the girls who inspire us daily. And to everyone who has the courage to face their pain and seek healing. May this institute continue to be a beacon of hope for many years to come." Everyone raised their cups, even the girls with their juice glasses, and toasted. The sound of porcelain on porcelain echoed softly in the quiet garden. That night, after everyone had left and the girls were sleeping soundly in their beds, Robert sat in his study one last time. He looked at the portrait of Eleanor on the wall, that wedding photo, where she smiled with pure joy. "We did it, my love," he said quietly. "We turned pain into purpose, tragedy, into legacy. The girls are more than okay, they're extraordinary, and we will continue to help other families, honoring your memory through action and love. Thank you for teaching me what really matters. Thank you for our daughters. Thank you for everything." He turned off the light and went up to his room, passing the hallway where the girls slept. He paused at each of their doors, watching them in the dim light. Julia was hugging a teddy bear. Sophia had a book still open beside her bed. Helen was sleeping on her side with her hands under her pillow. His daughters, his miracles, his reason for being. Robert lay down in his own bed and, for the first time in years, slept deeply without nightmares, without anguish, without fear. He slept the sleep of one who had done the best he could, who had turned darkness into light, who had found meaning in pain. He slept the sleep of one who was finally at peace. End of story. Dear listeners, we hope the story of Robert, the triplets Julia, Sophia, and Helen, and the incredible Mrs. Agnes has touched your hearts deeply. This journey of overcoming adversity shows us that even in the most difficult situations, when all seems lost, there is a possibility for a new beginning. That genuine love can heal wounds that seem impossible to mend, and that sometimes the most unlikely people bring the greatest transformations into our lives. If this story resonated with you, if you know someone who is going through family trauma, or if you simply believe in the transformative power of love, please leave a comment sharing your thoughts. Subscribe to our channel so you don't miss the next stories we've prepared with so much care, each one exploring the complexity of human life and the extraordinary capacity we all have to overcome adversity. Leave a like if this narrative moved you as much as it moved us to create it. Every day we bring unique stories that celebrate resilience, love, and the beauty of starting over. Together, we continue to spread hope, one story at a time, until the next emotional journey we share with you.